Hello, and welcome to another new episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. I'm your host, Alana Kessler, and today we are going to be talking about the root of food addiction. We're going to get a little sciencey here, but we're going to be talking about one of the biggest pieces of the emotional eating puzzle of that urgency that we feel, that kind of like, why do I keep going back to food, even though I know that it is not what I want to do deep down? It's not what's going to serve me deep down. Why do I keep feeling like food is this monster that I have no control over? And the reason is because you are stuck in a dopamine loop. And we are going to talk about this dopamine loop today on the episode. And the dopamine loop is the reason why emotional eating, binging, it feels so satisfying in the moment, or even like feels so huge, right? It feels like this charge inside of you that you just is like overtaking your whole body, right? Like that's something that this is what that feeling feels like. It's like it's taking over your whole body. And then for like a moment or five, you eat something sweet and it gives you this kind of like sense of calm, relaxing. But then like an hour later, there's edginess, guilt, all these things. And it's a cycle. It's a cycle over and over again. And this is the episode where we're going to break it down and we're going to talk about ways that we can start to disentangle ourselves from this loop. Okay. So when I first started to unpack my own emotional eating, and when I first started to unpack my relationship with binging and with food addiction, it was this weird thing where, like, logically, I knew that eating this food in an hour or two was going to make me feel bad, but it was like my brain was not in the driver's seat at all. It was like my brain wasn't in the driver's seat at all. And, it took a while for me to slow down enough to realize that what was underneath the behavior, the action, what was underneath the food addiction wasn't really so much about food at all, but it was I would be reaching for food because I was feeling sad. I was feeling lonely. I was feeling something heavy, right? Like I was feeling a heaviness inside of my heart. And I would reach for food and it would make me feel better for a moment, right? Instantly, for a moment it would make me feel better. And the truth is that what happens is that we get desensitized to it. So in the beginning, it wasn't that I was binging. It wasn't that I was emotional eating. I didn't immediately in the beginning get to the place of guilt and just like overwhelm and tiredness and all that stuff. And like it didn't feel like a cycle. In the beginning, it actually did help because my chemistry and body chemistry was kind of working against me. Okay. And then I'd find myself in a situation where I was feeling worse more than I was feeling good. And if you can relate to this, then you're in the right place and believe, you can bet your bottom dollar that I have the way out of this. Okay. So eventually what I realized, and what many people that, work with me in my programs, and maybe even you realize, is that your inability to control your urgency and your compulsive behavior with reaching for food in these moments, it's not that you don't have good willpower. It's not that there's something lacking in your resolve, right? It's not that you're weak. It's not that you're broken. It's like I said, it's your biology, right? Your brain and your body and your chemistry created this loop with dopamine that kept pulling you back into the drug of choice, which is food, every time that you feel overwhelmed. And once you understand how it works, Once you can start to disentangle, deconstruct, slow down the pieces, then you can start to insert different, then you could start to change. Then you could start to change the cycle. You could be an interrupter, right? You could be a disruptor of the cycle. And that's essentially what healing is. That's essentially what overcoming emotional eating is. It's becoming the interrupter of a pattern that subconsciously, biologically, chemistry wise has become our normal, has become our, setting. And it takes a while sometimes it takes time to, to shift and to upgrade from a default setting into a new setting. And there's nothing more honorable that you could do for yourself than to take that time and to take that's, and really just invest the time, your resources, your attention into making those changes. So let's just start with the basics a little bit of what is dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in your brain. Yeah, we're Science 101, neurotransmitter in your brain that drives the reward mechanism, right? It drives the reward mechanism, which includes pleasure and it includes reinforcement. So it's like your brain's feel-good messenger. Every time that you do something that your brain perceives as rewarding, whether it's finishing a task, whether it's getting a hug, whether it's whether it's doing a good job, getting approval, right? Or whether it's something that's right. What we want is for you to get that dopamine feeling of esteem, right? It's anything that gives you self-esteem. We want this to be sovereign. We want this to be self-generated. We want it to be through independent things, right? Like approval from someone else is a bit codependent. Feeling good from food is codependent, right? Obviously getting a hug, that's interdependent, right? That's not necessarily codependent, that's interdependent. So we for sure can get feel good neurotransmitters, the feel good neurotransmitter from other people, but then it goes too far, right? Like getting a hug and physical touch is good, but like what about you know physical kind of sexual addictions? That's similar to food addiction, right? It goes over the line, it goes too far, right? And so the goal is to be able to get the pleasure without it like burning out, right? So if you think about, it's a really good example because we actually just had our heat break in our house in Louisville, which sucks because you think that we live in the South and that it doesn't get cold here, which is what I thought, but I was wrong because it has snowed for the last week and it is 20 degrees. But interesting, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because our heat has broken a couple times. It's been a cycle. We get a new igniter. It has broken 3 weeks later. And we finally realized that the reason why it broke is because the voltage of the furnace is too high for the igniter and it keeps busting it. It keeps burning it out. The voltage is too high. And so the reason I bring this up is because it's the same thing with dopamine, right? If we get the voltage too high on dopamine and we just we press the button too much and it's too high, it ends up like creating this cycle of heaviness and negativity in the end. So there's like a middle way where you get to feel the pleasure from food, but not where it goes overboard, where then you end up where you end up burning out your reward feedback mechanism that should give you self-esteem, but instead, and should make you feel good, but instead you're kind of abusing it a little bit. So now it's kind of, it's fried, essentially. It got fried. And now you just feel bad all the time and you feel like you just need more hits of the dopamine all the time. And that's what the feedback loop is, where we just keep going back there. We just keep going back there and we need more of it to feel good, and the feel good lasts for a shorter amount of time. Okay. And so the loop starts with a trigger, right? This is how the loop starts, where it's like the fried loop, where the reward system gets fried, not where the reward system is in its healthy place, where the reward system gets fried. It starts with a trigger, and it usually starts super innocently. So it starts with a trigger. You're stressed from work, you're feeling lonely, you're overwhelmed, you're sad. Maybe there's like a nagging feeling of lack of purpose. You don't like your job, something, right? You just got into a fight with someone. You're worried that someone's mad at you. You're procrastinating. You just tried something on and you didn't like how it fit. So maybe there's just something that triggered you. And then you innocently reach for food as a way to comfort yourself. You get that dopamine hit, that moment of relief. And for a little while, it feels okay. But then maybe you need more. And maybe then you're doing this every day. And then when you do this every day or multiple times a week, it starts to become your body, especially if it's sugary stuff, your body starts to get addicted to needing this substance to get it to the place of feeling good. But the feeling good isn't internally generated. It's not something that's sustainable. It's something that it's artificial. And then we feel bad. And then we feel bad. And then we start seeing the physical results of this behavior, which is weight gain, which is low energy, which is more edginess. And we start to criticize ourselves, and the negative self-talk comes like, why can't I control myself? Why can't I stop? Like, it's just like, I can't do it. Like, what's wrong with me? And then that sets the stage for like a more contracted view of ourselves. It's just, we get heavier around, emotionally, physically with ourselves. And we're more susceptible to feeling negativity. And then it repeats, right? Our world gets very narrow to like feel bad, get a reward. It lasts for 5 seconds. I want to get more reward. Now I've gotten too much reward and now I feel gross. It's all negative, and then the cycle continues, right? And like I said, I understand it is really like a drug. For me, food was like a drug, right? At a certain point, you're not hungry for this, right? Like, you're not doing this because you're hungry, right? You're doing it to self-soothe. That's what I did. For a long time, it felt automatic, right? Like, it felt like it was me. For a long time, at a certain point, I couldn't separate my own inherent ability to be in control. I couldn't separate my own powerfulness from this behavior. Like, me and this behavior were one and the same. And I know a lot of my clients feel the same. They can't see themselves as separate from this behavior. But this is the first step. We need to separate ourselves from this behavior. And this is one of the first steps of breaking free from the dopamine loop, right? We have compassion for ourselves. We need to be able to see the behavior as a behavior, not who we are inherently, and then start to get deeper into the why and what is the reason why our body, brain, and body chemistry immediately just snap into this behavior. And so slowing down is the key. Bringing awareness is key. I got a question in my mentorship from somebody the other day. Maybe you're listening to this, where she said, how does being aware of my triggers help me stop binging? This is it. You need to recognize that you're in the loop. And the only way you could do that is through curiosity and through some sort of structure to be able to give yourself the ability to say, like, what's going on here? What am I feeling? But the first step is recognizing you're in a loop. And that's what I started to do, right? Like, I started to notice, like, I made connections between like circumstances in my life, right? It was like, if I reached for the ice cream when I was by myself in my apartment on a weeknight, I probably knew that I was feeling lonely or something, or stressed or something was going on. And before I just automatically went to the ice cream, I would like pause. I would slow down, because in the slowing down, I was able to make space for a different choice. In the slowing down, I was able to widen the capacity to grow my nervous system to be able to be my own friend. I didn't need the food to be my friend. I needed to learn how to hold space for and be able to say out loud and name the emotions that I'm feeling inside. And this is the first step. And it might feel really unnatural at first. And it's like, oh, it's the last thing I want to do. And I'm feeling like the charge and the energy of like, oh my God, I need to like move. I need to like get this food. I need to do this. It might be the last thing that you want to do, which is to like pause and be like, okay, what am I gonna like? Let me pause. Let me acknowledge I'm about to be in a loop. And now I'm going to, go inside and go deep with myself. That might be the last thing that you really want to do, but that is the first step. And then you have to learn how to be with the fact that your discomfort is probably going to still be there, right? Like it's going to still be there, but then it'll go away. And that I could promise you, right? It'll be there, but then it'll go away. And then once you have that space, once you're suspended in that space, you can find alternative ways to pacify the energy, right? So you can do something else, right? You can exercise. Doesn't have to be crazy. You can go out, you can go outside, you can take outside, taking yourself out of a space into a new space is great. If you live in an apartment building, you can go downstairs, go outside, walk outside, take a breath of fresh air, slap yourself with some new sensations, right? And it's great. If you live in a house, you could do the same thing. You could take a walk around the block. You could turn on some music, call a friend, right? You just have to take some action in another direction, right? You could paint, you could journal. The only thing I wouldn't do is just sit and meditate, because like that's not going to move the energy. You need to move the energy. Okay? So that's definitely something that you want to start doing, but you first need to break the spell of the dopamine loop, which is recognizing you're in it and being courageous enough to pause and feel the energy in your body before you just pacify it with food immediately. And then you're back in the same situation a couple hours later. Okay. And then you have to relearn how to feel pleasure without it being scary. Okay. Without it feeling naughty or punishable or bad. Okay, you need to learn to reclaim pleasure in your life outside of food. Okay, so we need to learn how to feel pleasure, find other ways to feel comfort, relaxed, joyful other than food, emotionally, especially. Emotionally, especially. And that's why healing from emotional eating and overcoming food addiction is so much less about actual food. And it's so much more about emotional support. It's so much less about food and so much more about emotional support. Yes. Do we need to have some blueprints and, a little bit of structure with eating? If we want to lose weight, especially, yes. But without the emotional support and the emotional infrastructure and, kind of really building that up and expanding that within ourselves, it's no amount of meal plans, diet, structure with eating is going to work long term. It's not going to change a thing. So it's really about emotional support. Okay. So, whether that emotional support is something that you build within yourself, right? Like you start to build spiritual practices for yourself. You have routines for feeling good, and then you have to prioritize it, be committed to it, right? Like the only reason why this dopamine cycle got so bad is because we committed and prioritized it for so long. But it's the same thing the other direction. If you commit to and prioritize, other things, spiritual practices that create generative pleasure within you, then that's also going to become the new normal, right? So whether that's, mindfulness, right? That's kind of generic, but like whether that's like a meditation practice, a walking meditation practice, a routine, holding ourselves accountable to something and then doing it is such a good dopamine creator. Like I know that when I have a commitment to myself and then when I don't want to do it, but then I do it, I feel amazing afterwards. That's a dopamine generator, reward center that's not going to burn out the reward center. It's not going to fry the reward center like binging is. Right? Because your brain's reward system, it's not your enemy. It's not bad. It's actually life. It's meant to give us momentum. And so we need to guide it in a way that it's going to be supportive for us. Right? And so by understanding this dopamine loop, by understanding this loop, by understanding how the loop is created, by understanding how we can disentangle ourselves from the loop, and then by recognizing that pleasure and reward is not something that we need to exploit or be afraid of, then we can break free from emotional eating. Then we can lose weight for good. Then we can really find pleasure in food without guilt or shame. Okay. So if this resonates with you, I do this work with hundreds of women, and I'm currently doing this work with women in my Eat Freely, Live Fully mentorship. The link to join that mentorship, we're offering a trial. You can get in for 30 days for $33. It's so, so, so low lift, and there's so much value. The community is amazing. I really, really hope that you join that. I'd love to support you in this. And if you are continuing to listen to the podcast, I so, so appreciate you. If you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, if you're listening on Apple, please continue sharing the podcast with your friends. Please leave a review. If you're watching on YouTube, please comment. We love getting comments there. And that's all for me for today. I can't wait to be back here next week. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped.